both pilots.
Can you fly this plane and land it?
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's a topic that I've covered here on the channel, how when a lot of these big corporations, which have essentially taken over entertainment, specifically we'll be talking about Disney here, who went on an enormous acquisition spree, most notably Marvel. They also acquired Lucasfilm, but they also acquired like Sesame Street, the Muppets, and a lot of those characters from Jim Henson. And we have word lately that someone deeply associated with a lot of those characters is no longer invited to the party to participate in the creation of the characters on Sesame Street and in the Muppets. And here to talk with me about that is a man. We know Mark Pellegrini is a comic book writer. We know he loves horror, but he's also an enormous kid at heart. He loves the Muppets and Sesame Street and all kinds of stuff made for kids. How you doing, Mark Pellegrini?
I'm doing great. And yeah, I do love the Muppets. That kind of have a hard cutoff point, and that's right about when Jim Henson died. That's kind of when everything, kind of changed for the Muppets. But yeah, no, they're eternal. Everybody loves the Muppets. Who hates the Muppets? Come on.
Well, certainly not me. I remember growing up, Muppet Babies was definitely one of my favorite cartoons, if not my favorite. It's essentially a bunch of little nerds going off on adventures using their imagination.
Exactly. It's one of those. So Muppet Babies is a really interesting show. It's kind of hard to, as an adult, to go back and watch. It's not like Transformers or G.I. Joe or Ninja Turtles where you can watch it as an adult and kind of. It's a preschooler show, but just because it was a show for preschoolers doesn't mean that they half-assed it. In fact, if you just watch an episode, it has visually one of the most unique cartoons of that era of the 80s. The way that they have like the black and white photographs for backgrounds, the way they mixed in live action footage from actual movies and the animation.
Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all that.
Indiana Jones, Ghostbusters. I mean, it's such a unique looking show, and there really isn't any other cartoon like it out there. And then you watch like the new CG Muppet Babies, where it's just like bland and lifeless and generic. I'm like, wow, yeah, all the love and magic and passion just drained out of the Jim Henson Corporation between then and now.
They don't exactly use your imagination as much, and it's certainly not about having fun. It really was just about different characters going on adventures together. Now it's all about obviously messaging, because they're trying to influence children using the program. So instead of an episode being dedicated to the kids imagining themselves as Indiana Jones, specifically Kermit, I believe, who's one of them who did that. Or Miss Piggy being Princess Leia or whatever, exciting adventure. It's all about whatever message of the week it is. And normally it comes right out of the progressive platform at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I gave like the new Muppet Babies like 1 or 2 episodes, like 15 minutes each, aren't they? I don't know, but it's a show for preschoolers, so I don't really have any reason to watch it. I know you've got kids, so you have to watch it and other things of that nature.
Actually, I went and found the old episodes, and my 5-year-old at the time, he's 6 now, he preferred the old stuff with the, which was a straight, like recorded off of VCR tape.
I know,
rather
because
than being HD, better than what was going on the Disney Channel.
Well, your kid has good taste, but I think most kids would enjoy the older one versus the newer one. One, because the older one is just visually more interesting, but it's more fun. It's about having fun. I mean, they had lessons, but the lessons were more like, it's like the difference between like reading Rainbow and
like
Captain
listen
Planet.
To your parents.
Yeah, stuff like
Don't
that.
lie.
Eat healthy, stuff like that. Yeah, no, classic Muppet Babies was just about, hey, what's fun? Having fun and just going out and playing. It was trying to encourage kids to go out and play. Just sort of like Reading Rainbow wasn't teaching kids how to read. It was teaching kids why they should read. And we don't have enough media for kids like that, where the media now is so structured. It's like, no, we have to teach them something rigid and clear. Whereas like, how about we just encourage them to use their imaginations and have fun and play? Isn't that important as well? Like, no, they have to be ready to go to public school and get indoctrinated.
Yeah, for the most part. So we're starting to find out why. Not only was it acquired by Disney, but Frank Oz, who was the voice of Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, Sam Eagle, Animal, and Marvin Suggs on the Muppets, as well as Bert Grover, Cookie Monster on Sesame Street, says he's no longer invited to the party. And this is one of his quotes: "I'd love to do the Muppets again, but Disney doesn't want me, and Sesame Street hasn't asked me back for 10 years. They don't want me because I won't follow orders, and I won't do the kind of Muppets they believe in. He continued on. The soul's not there. The soul is what makes things grow and be funny, but I miss them and I love them. And I appreciate Frank Oz, essentially speaking out about this. Disney's a huge corporation. That sounds like that bridge is already burned, but he's right. The soul is missing. If you go in and watch these things, what they were originally intended to do and what they are nowadays as essentially a vehicle for delivering pretty heavy-handed messaging is absolutely insane. And the fact that someone of Frank Oz's stature, it's not like he just was the voice of these characters in Yoda, but he's also an acclaimed director as well. But he can't even get in there because he recognizes that there's something wrong and he's willing to say it.
And no, that's the really sad thing too. Is Frank Oz kind of retired from the Muppets years ago, but it was after the Disney acquisition, and you can tell. Obviously, now we know why he stepped away from the Muppets. He hasn't played Fozzie or Miss Piggy in over 10 years. He stopped doing that a long time ago. And it's not just Frank Oz. Steve Whitmire got fired, I think 2 years ago from the Muppets. And Steve Whitmire and Frank Oz were two of the last original, like the OG Jim Henson crew who worked. Frank Oz goes back to like the 60s or the 70s. The 60s, he was an original Sesame Street actor, Bert and Ernie. And then Steve Whitmire, I think he started in like 1980, but they still worked on the original Muppet show. They're OG Muppeteers, and one had to Frank Oz basically had to retire. He kind of got forced out, and Steve Whitmire just got straight up fired by Disney because they wouldn't play by Disney's corporate rules. Like, who knows the Muppets better than these guys who worked on it with Jim Henson back in the day on the original Muppet show? And yet you've got these people in Disney corporate who think they know what's best for the Muppets. Like the kind of hubris it takes to say, like, no, you guys who worked with Jim on the most acclaimed Muppets projects, you don't know what the Muppets need. We do. The Disney Corporation, we know what's best for the Muppets. And that's everything that's kind of wrong with major corporations just like devouring every IP they can get their hands on.
And Sesame Street's almost like a very similar thing going on there. If you watch Sesame Street back in the day, it was all about teaching kids some fundamentals on reading, counting, stuff like that. And so that you teach kids to respect each other and, how to play and, some different games and songs. But if you watch it nowadays, it's like, well, we've got to teach kids. What was the big headline that like Sesame Street finally has a homeless Muppet?
Yeah, meanwhile, Oscar the Grouch is like, am I a joke to you?
Oscar the Grouch
living in a trash can for 40 years,
He wasn't homeless, who is?
They've changed. So Sesame Street is not owned by Disney. I believe they're still owned by Children's Television Workshop. They're actually parts of one of the agreements when Disney bought Muppets is that they couldn't get Sesame Street. But even then, Children's Television Workshop is associated with PBS. PBS decides what goes on those shows, and so they're of the same like mind as Disney with the kind of messaging they want to put in the Sesame Street programming. And you're right, it has become less about the reading, writing, and arithmetic aspect of Sesame Street, and more about social messaging. Wasn't there also like an HIV positive Muppet that they
gotta have an HIV positive Muppet to teach kids about AIDS.
Yep, and they've got a homeless Muppet, and I think they have a homosexual Muppets, not Bert and Ernie. We all know that joke, but like actual homosexual Muppets. They're using the very first thing that most kids watch. Like their first TV show is probably Sesame Street or something along those lines, and so they're using it to indoctrinate them from the ground up when the kids are so young that they barely even know how to form words. They're watching.
And the parents grew up on this stuff and they trust it because they remember liking it as a kid. I remember Sesame Street as a kid. I remember the Muppet Babies and the Muppets and what it was all about. But as an adult, now that I'm seeing it, I became a father a little bit later in life. I'm like, holy crap! Everything is changed here. This isn't. Why even call it the Sesame Street anymore? It's a different program with the same characters.
It's like that with. You talk about it all the time on this channel. It's not just the Muppets. It's every single corporate IP that you grew up enjoying. He-Man, and how did that turn out? The new He-Man show on was it Netflix? She-Ra on Netflix. Like every single thing you enjoyed back in the day as a child that you trust, you watch it now, and it's all been hijacked for propaganda and indoctrination. But most parents just aren't that. They're like, oh, it's He-Man. my kid will enjoy He-Man because I enjoyed He-Man, so they set them down in front of it. Oh, it's Sesame Street. I watched that when I was a child. It's harmless. It's educational. It's good. And you sit them down in front of it. The new Muppet Babies show that has an episode about transgenderism now, and the corporations know that. They know that you grew up with Sesame Street and the Muppet Show. You trust it. You'll sit your kid down, no questions asked, in front of a new Muppets or Sesame Street program, and with the assumption that things haven't changed, that it's still the same show that it was when you were a kid, and it's not. You'll give your kid a Batman comic and assume it's the same kind of Batman comic you read when you were a kid. It's not. That's the strategy, and it's working.
And it doesn't stop there. We've obviously seen this week that it's in the schools. We've all kind of known that, but people are becoming a little bit more brazen. These teachers, they don't even hide the fact that they're trying to indoctrinate your children and teacher change the beliefs that you've taught them.
Yeah, there's that one teacher who just his video went viral because he just openly said, like, yeah, I'm teaching communism and socialism to the students, and I'm going to brainwash them, and I'm going to turn them into communists, and I'm going to turn them into Leninists, and no consequences. People can get away with that.
I believe he got fired.
Well, did he? Okay, good.
He didn't believe he would be, or he wouldn't have been talking about that.
No,
There's the other teacher that was making the children pledge allegiance to the pride flag and to the U.S. flag.
And I've seen ones who make them sing the Black national anthem and stuff like that. But getting back on topic with the Muppets, now I think what Frank Oz was talking about specifically probably didn't. His point of view probably didn't have to do with what we're talking about, propaganda and things like that. I think it's more just creative decisions.
The kind of humor.
Yeah, the kind of humor. There's a movie that Frank Oz has wanted to make since like the 80s. And he was going to make it when Jim Henson was alive. Then Jim Henson passed away. Henson's children, Brian Henson and the rest of the family kind of took over. They're the ones who sold the Henson company to Disney, and they're Disney's lackeys. Brian Henson will just agree with whatever the Disney Corporation says because that's his gravy train. But the movie that Frank Oz has wanted to make was called The Cheapest Muppet Movie Ever Made. And it sounds hilarious. It's Gonzo trying to direct a movie, but he doesn't have any money. So it's just the exact kind of humor you expect from the Muppets, that self-deprecating, like we can barely put it all together, but like, gosh darn it, we try, that sort of attitude that the Muppets have. It's why the Muppets are inspiring, is that they know that they're terrible, but they do it anyway, and they love doing it. I'll give credit where it's due. The 2012 movie, The Muppets, I enjoyed that movie, and I thought
that's the really Jason Segel movie.
Yeah, the Jason Segel movie.
You could see that he liked Muppets.
He did, and I think the reason and I think the reason that movie worked as well as it did is because Jason Segel, it was a work of passion on his part, and that he really understood and appreciated the Muppets. Even if Frank Oz wasn't involved, several of the original Muppeteers were. Steve Whitmire was still around. And oh gosh, what's his name? Not Richard Hunt. Oh, darn it. His name's getting away from me, but several of them. Oh, Dave Goelz as Gonzo was in there. They were still working on it, and they're working with someone who genuinely, sincerely wanted to make the best authentic Muppet project that he could. Frank Oz stepped away though because Disney would not let him make the Muppet movie he wanted to make. And who would make a better Muppet movie than Frank Oz? Can I just ask, who is more qualified to make a Muppet movie than Frank Oz? Why are they questioning him and saying
he made the Little Shop of Horrors into a live-action film?
Jeez.
It made money.
It made money, and it's fantastic. It outdid the original. And didn't Oz direct Muppets Take Manhattan, the third one? I believe he did.
I believe so, yeah.
I mean, so he's directed Muppet movies. I mean, him and Jim Henson, I think, are one of the greatest comedy duos. If you go back and you watch the characters that they portrayed together, like Kermit and Miss Piggy or Bert and Ernie, they were so funny together. They're like an Abbott and Costello, kind of comedy duo that was so great. And then when Jim Henson died, we lost that forever. But then I've been mentioning Steve Whitmire a lot. So Steve Whitmire, he was one of the younger Muppeteers who came around like 1980, but he had been with the Muppets for a long time. He created Rizzo and voiced and performed Rizzo the Rats. He also created Bean Bunny, my least favorite Muppet of all time. But he was even being trained by Jim Henson to.
Have you seen Summer the Penguin?
Oh, that's the one from the new Muppet Babies cartoon, right? She's the one.
That might be your least favorite Muppet if you watched it.
If I'm sure it would be. But Steve Whitmire, he replaced Jim Henson as Kermit after Jim Henson died. But Henson had actually been training him to be his fill-in because Henson was too busy doing the corporate aspect of running his company. So Steve Whitmire was going to replace him as Kermit anyway. But then Henson died, and Whitmire had to step up. And he got fired by Disney because Disney wanted him to train alternates for Kermit. They wanted him to basically make a lot of script changes, things like that. Disney's interference on Muppets Most Wanted is the reason why that movie flopped and honestly wasn't very good.
Jason Segel wasn't a part of that one.
Yeah, he wasn't a part of that. That one was so. The Muppets was a great movie made by people passionate about the Muppets. Muppets Most Wanted was a design by committee, Disney just getting their fingers and everything. And you can even tell from the start of that movie where the Muppets are singing the opening theme song, and it's the Muppets again, and it's set to the tune of Together Again from Muppets Take Manhattan. And you can tell that was supposed to be the title of the movie because it fits. It's the Muppets. They came up with a really lousy title because they're the Muppets. That's the kind of the humor that they have. And they perform this theme song that leads into the title. And Disney just came like, no, the Muppets again is not marketable enough. Let's call it the Muppets Most Wanted. And then, they have this song that doesn't even lead into the correct title anymore because the corporation got in the way, and it's just a lousy movie. But it's all been downhill from there, Instead of letting Frank Oz make his Muppet movie, Disney was like churning out these really crappy direct-to-video movies like Muppet Wizard of Oz and Muppet's Letter to Santa, these like really just spineless, bland, boring movies that they just want to slap the IP on. And that's what Disney wants to do with the Muppets. Whereas, Frank Oz and Whitmire wanted to make genuine, authentic, kind of Muppets programs, the kind that they made with Jim Henson back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And Disney's just not having it. And now Disney's just cleaned house. They've gotten rid of all the OG Muppeteers who've been there since forever. And now there's no one to argue with them or disagree with them, and they're just going to keep making these bland, boring projects. And
there's no Muppets, because this is what Frank Oz said. This is his last quote. There's an inability for corporate America to understand the value of something they bought. They never understood with us. It's not just about the puppets. It's about the performers who love each other and have worked together for many years.
And that's so sad to hear that that's how things have changed, but it's absolutely true. I mean, you appreciate something so much more when you make it yourself than when you just go out and buy it. It's like I think I enjoy a hamburger I cook myself more than a burger I go and I get at like a fast food joint, because I appreciate the time and effort I spent in cooking that meal more than just going out and paying $10 and getting it. And it's the same thing with the Muppets. And the Muppeteers back in the day, they didn't just voice the Muppets. They designed them. They built the puppets. They performed them, and they voiced them. I mean, like Richard Hunt created Scooter. Scooter was his signature character. He didn't just like fill in and voice Scooter. And it's the same thing with. It was why Steve Whitmire didn't want to just train a whole bunch of like alternates to voice the various Muppet characters, because Disney as a corporation just views the Muppets as interchangeable. Like, oh, we can just get, whoever to voice them. It doesn't matter. I'm like, but to the actual Muppeteers who've been there since the day, like, no, it does matter. We created these characters. We carved these puppets with our own two hands. Dave Goelz created Gonzo and built his entire character and personality over the course of several years across the Muppet Show. But to say that doesn't matter and that you can just get these interchangeable actors to come and fill them in like it's, a cartoon voice actor where, Bugs Bunny has like 5 different people voicing him these days because Warner Brothers views, the actor doesn't matter. Bugs Bunny is just an intellectual
Bugs Bunny
property.
And the Looney Tunes reboot, another thing that just doesn't get the characters.
No, and they never will understand. I mean, when Richard Hunt died, they actually retired Scooter as a Muppet having a voice, because that was Richard Hunt's character. When Disney bought the Muppets, first thing they did was they cast somebody to voice Scooter, and now Scooter's back and he's got a new voice and he's funny still. But the idea of retiring a character when the Muppeteer who created them died, that's gone. And corporations don't look at it that way. But that's how it was back in the day, because they were all a tight knit group of friends. They were more like a family, and they viewed their creations with a lot of passion. But they they sold to
If
a
you're looking at
corporation. And so,
the stuff that Disney has, whether it be Marvel, Lucasfilm, the Muppets, any of the stuff that they bought up and they're churning out their version of. You're not alone. Frank Oz also sees that anything Disney buys, they destroy, they take the life out of it, and you basically get presented with an empty husk, to tell lame jokes and push propaganda, because that's what it's all about these days. Mark, I'll let you have the last word on this one. And I do want to reiterate, I am very appreciative for Frank Oz speaking out like this. Certainly it couldn't have been easy for him.
Well, I mean, I think the lesson to be learned here, if we're going to go all Sesame Street in this episode, is that this is what happens if you sell your intellectual property to a corporation. You have to be ready to know that it's not yours anymore. It belongs to the lawyers and the suits and the executives, and they can take it away from you at any time. Frank Oz created Ms. Piggy. He created Fozzie. He created so many characters, and they just took them all away from him. Steve Whitmire created so many Muppets and worked for so many years, and they just took it all away from him. They have no authority and no power over their own creations anymore. They got that check, I guess, from Disney, but they lost everything in exchange. So if you're going to sell out to a corporation, just beware. They can take it from you at any time, and there's nothing you can do about it.